On the day my boss's son became director, he fired me with the phrase, "We don't keep dead weight here." I kept my composure and left with dignity. The next day, his father was shouting in the office, "Did you read her agreement?" Minutes later, my phone started ringing non-stop. The office atmosphere was unusually calm that Monday morning. It was a heavy silence, almost tangible, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for something inevitable. I had already noticed the signs in recent days. Muffled whispers when I passed by, doors that closed quickly, furtive glances that diverted as soon as they crossed mine. But today, something felt different. The air was charged with peculiar electricity, as if the entire building shared a secret that hadn't yet reached my ears. I had worked there for over 15 years. I started as an administrative assistant, back when the company could barely pay the rent on its modest headquarters. I saw everything grow. The peeling walls gave way to impeccable paint, the old desks were replaced by modern furniture, and I grew along with it all. I was promoted, took on huge responsibilities, faced impossible deadlines, but never complained. I believed in that company, believed in what we built together, and above all, believed that loyalty held some value. I was reviewing the quarterly reports when the new director's secretary knocked on the door. "He wants to see you now," she said with a strange tone in her voice. I climbed the stairs with the documents in hand, imagining it was just another presentation or routine meeting. When I entered the room, I found Alan, the spoiled son of the owner, recently appointed general director, standing with his hands in his pockets and an arrogant smile on his face. His expensive suit seemed to scream who he was, someone who never had to fight for anything. "Have a seat, Regina," he said, gesturing dismissively. I sat down, trying to keep my expression neutral. "I'll be direct," he continued, without beating around the bush. "You are no longer needed here. In fact, your work is irrelevant, and we don't have room for dead weight." The words hit like a physical blow, but my expression remained unshaken. I didn't beg, question, or cry. I took a deep breath and responded, "All right, just send the termination documents to my email." He seemed disconcerted by my calmness. Perhaps he expected hysteria, tears, or pleas. But I simply stood up, adjusted my bag on my shoulder, and walked out of the room with the same dignity with which I entered. In the elevator, I stared at my reflection in the mirror. There was sadness in my eyes, yes, and a pang of humiliation. But above all, there was something he could never see. Certainty. That night was long. Messages began arriving, surprised colleagues, some outraged, others with that hollow pity that feeds no one. I ignored them all. I ate dinner in silence, with my phone turned off, and before sleeping, I reread for the last time the contract. I had signed with Alan's father years ago, a contract that, from all indications, he had never read. The next morning, I was still having coffee when the phone rang. It was the receptionist at the building where the company operated. "Regina, Mr. Volter is here, and, well, he's furious." I smiled to myself. I knew this moment would come. I hung up the phone and calmly went to the window in the living room. The sky was clear, the sun slowly rising between the buildings. This morning would be different for them. In the boardroom, the mood had drastically changed. Walter, the patriarch of the company, an imposing man with an explosive temper, stormed into the building yelling, frightening employees and making everyone exchange glances. "Where is he? Where's the idiot who calls himself my son?" Alan was in the meeting room, reviewing his grandiose plans, when the door was violently flung open. "Have you lost your mind?" Walter bellowed. "Tell me this is a joke. Did you read her retention agreement before signing the termination?" Alan turned pale. "What agreement?" "She was useless, Dad. An outdated relic." Walter snorted with anger and slammed a heavy folder onto the table. "Relic is your ability to think, boy. This is what you should have read before acting like a spoiled brat. She's the one who supported this company through crises, who kept projects alive when everyone else fled. And that's why, when we signed her retention contract, I included specific clauses. Alan picked up the papers and began flipping through them. As he read, his shoulders sank, as if each line weighed tons. "She's entitled to retroactive bonuses?" he murmured, incredulous. "Temporary equity participation? Exclusivity clause? Penalty for unilateral breach?" Walter crossed his arms, gritting his teeth. "You just handed her 500,000 reais, a severance bonus, and the freedom to take all the projects she created, including the one the board was about to approve. Not to mention that, according to the contract, she's now free to start a competing company without any restrictions." "Dad, I didn't know. Why didn't you read it?" Meanwhile, I was at home, reviewing drafts of a project I had never been allowed to execute within that company. A logistics automation system that would reduce transportation costs by up to 38%. I developed this over the past 3 years, during overtime, weekends, and silent nights, without receiving an extra cent for it. But thanks to my useless agreement, that project now belonged to me. And unlike Alan, I always read every line of the documents I signed. I called a lawyer, then a friend who worked at a competing company, much larger and with capital to invest. Within a week, I was in a meeting room presenting graphs, prototypes, and market estimates that years ago no one even looked at. Meanwhile, at the old company, they were trying to patch things up. But it was too late. Dead weight doesn't sink alone. It drags down whoever despises it. 2 weeks after my dismissal, I sat across from a white marble table on the top floor of a glass building, facing 6 attentive executives. All impeccably dressed, all eyes fixed on the projections I presented. For the first time in many years, I spoke without interruption. Every argument was heard, every idea analysed, every plan valued. The logistics automation project was unanimously approved. A month later, I was appointed Director of Innovation at that giant company, which not only absorbed my project, but also gave me carte blanche to build a team from scratch. I chose the best. Many of them were former colleagues from the old company, people who, like me, had been underestimated, ignored, or discarded by Alan in his blind attempt to modernise something he barely understood. I prepared invitations for the project launch event. At the top of the guest list were Alan and Walter. Of course they would come. On the night of the event, I dressed elegantly. A antique dark blue dress, sober but striking. My hands trembled slightly as I held the microphone, not from fear but from intensity. When I stepped onto the stage, I saw the two of them sitting in the second row, side by side. Walter was tense, his jaw clenched. Alan stared at the floor, avoiding my gaze. I smiled. "Good evening, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank those who underestimated me, who said my work was dispensable, that I was just dead weight. It was thanks to you that I decided to forge my own path. And it was by leaving behind what held me back that I discovered everything I could become." The audience applauded. My eyes met Walter's, and for the first time I saw a trace of regret there. But it wasn't enough. Not after years of being silenced in meetings, ignored in presentations, called a reliable employee, only to be used and discarded. Alan, on the other hand, seemed to shrink in his chair with every word I said. And that, I confess, was a small personal victory. After the event, during the cocktail hour, Walter approached. He extended his hand. "Regina, we need to talk." I looked at his outstretched hand, then at his face. "Not now. I'm too busy living what you always said I couldn't achieve." And I walked away. That night when I got home, I opened a glass of wine and sat on the balcony. The wind blew gently, the city sparkling below, pulsating. I thought about everything I had faced to get here. Every meeting where I was cut off, every proposal, ignored, every forced compliment, every cutting remark of disdain. All of it shaped me, but it didn't destroy me. And the best was yet to come. 2 weeks after the event, my new company began absorbing part of the old clientele. Not out of revenge, but out of efficiency. Our performance reports showed visible and consistent improvements. Within less than a quarter, we surpassed all projected goals. The project that once gathered dust in the meeting room drawer was now the cover story of specialized magazines. And that's when the calls started. First came emails from consultants at the old company, trying to probe for information. Then, disguised messages of congratulations. But nothing that rattled me. Until, one morning, Walter himself appeared at the reception of my new company, unannounced. "Regina," he said, looking defeated. "We need to talk. The situation is spiraling out of control." I took a deep breath. "What do you want, Walter?" He hesitated, but continued. "Alan. He's lost. Investors are jumping ship. Clients are migrating. His decisions are sinking everything. And the project you took was the only real differentiator we had." I crossed my arms, listening in silence. Then he made the offer. "A return. The company is as much yours as ours. It always was." I laughed, sarcasm evident. "No, Walter. It was never mine. It was my responsibility, my headache, my burden, but never mine. The only thing they ever gave me there was the label of dead weight." He swallowed hard. I was wrong. "But Alan wasn't," I finished. "Alan showed who he always was. And you put him in my place, even knowing that the responsibility isn't solely his." He lowered his eyes. "We just want to save what's left." I thought about the sleepless nights, the discarded projects, the times I was called excessive for demanding recognition. I remembered the room where I was coldly fired, without a word of gratitude. I thought about Alan's voice, so full of arrogance, saying, "We don't keep dead weight around here." Then I stepped closer, keeping my tone firm and serene. "I'm not the saviour of bankrupt empires, Walter. I'm the founder of my own. You deal with the consequences of your own choices." I saw the exact moment his shoulders slumped. It was as if he finally understood that he had lost not only the most loyal employee he ever had, but also the chance to remain relevant in a market that doesn't forgive mistakes. He left without saying another word, and I returned to my work without a weight on my chest. The following week, the announcement came. The old company was up for sale. Alan had resigned under pressure from debts and scandals of mismanagement. The press reported the collapse mercilessly. Among all the interested parties, I contacted the consultancy handling the sale and scheduled a meeting. When I entered the glass-walled room, on the other side of the table were Walter, pale and defeated, and Alan, visibly thinner, with deep bags under his eyes, and a lost gaze. He looked like a punished child, but there was no remorse in his eyes, only the fear of losing everything. "You're here to buy?" Walter asked, his voice low. I sat calmly, crossed my legs, and placed my folder on the table. The silence was suffocating. "Yes, I'm here to buy, but not at market value, only for the crumbs that remain." Alan scoffed. "So that's it? You're here for revenge?" I smiled slowly. "No, Alan. My revenge began the day you signed my termination without reading it. What I'm doing now is just hammering the final nail into the coffin." I opened the folder and placed a signed letter of intent to purchase on the table. The proposal included acquisition of assets, brand, and database, but not the staff, since, except for 2 managers, all the valuable talent was already with me. Walter read the paper with trembling hands. He knew it was this or nothing. The company wouldn't survive another month. They signed 3 days later, and the transaction was finalised. I entered the old building as the owner. The corridors were empty, filled with stacked boxes and silence. Each step I took toward the room where I was called dead weight echoed like a drumbeat of justice. I opened the door. The desk where Alan used to sit was still there, with a leather chair and a silver plaque that read, "General Director." I removed the plaque, threw it in the trash, and replaced it with one I brought, "Archive Room." The company wouldn't operate again under the sea, same name. I used the assets that interested me and dissolved the rest. Who would have thought being called dead weight would turn out to be the greatest indirect compliment I could receive? The truth is that while they spent their days underestimating me, I was building something I didn't even realize I had. Funny how people only notice the value of things when they disappear, or in my case, when I walked out the door with my head held high. Now, looking back, I laugh at the irony. They dismissed me thinking I was irrelevant, but in reality, I was the only one who truly understood how the company worked. If they had known how much I knew, maybe they would have treated me better. But honestly, who am I to question Alan's brilliant business instincts? He always had a special talent for sinking ships he didn't even realize he was steering. Now, sitting here at the top of the world, I think about how easy it was to turn my dismissal into redemption. They thought they were getting rid of a burden, but in reality, they were planting the seed of their own ruin. The funniest part? I didn't have to do anything beyond letting them be alone with their decisions. After all, nothing says, "Thank you for the gift," quite like watching the circus burn from a distance. Now I really want to hear your thoughts in the comments, and until the next video here on the channel,